This story popped into our head the other night because we were talking about Dallas Cowboys who show up to the Star or Valley Ranch, and they are immediately judged by the staff, training staff, the equipment guys, coaches, scouts, secretarial pool, whatever. Boy, this guy's a professional. This guy conducts himself like a professional. The Terrence Steele comparison came up. The Dak Prescott comparison came up. And of course, the ideal, as we mentioned, was Troy Aikman. Troy Aikman comes to Dallas and he immediately understands this is how you conduct yourself. That doesn't mean, however, that Aikman didn't have his human moments, and that's what we're going to discuss here. Cowboys players punching out a coach? What? I'm Mike Fisher, your trusty and trusted reporter. I promised that we would do a special weekend edition of Breakfast at Fish&E's, and here it is. I take you back to 1990. And while, Aikman now has been here obviously a year, he hasn't established much, and he'd be the first to tell you that, except for his level of young professionalism. It's clear that he is a franchise leader kind of guy, a CEO of the locker room kind of guy. All these things are fair and true. But Jerry was in charge of what he was in charge of, CEO of what he was in charge of, Jimmy in charge of what he was in charge of course. And one of the things that Jimmy was in charge of is assembling his coaching staff. And the way I remember the story properly, before we get to Aikman, Daryl Johnston, Jeff Zimmerman, and I think Babe Laufenberg punching out David Shula almost. I think Babe is the fourth guy in the club. The background of how David Shula got here. If I'm remembering all this right, the chronology of it right, Dave Wannstedt gets a chance to jump from Jimmy's Miami Hurricanes team to go coach with Don Shula and the Dolphins. Move up for him, good for him. At the time, not only was Dave Wannstedt Jimmy's best friend, Dave once jokingly told me, that Dave Wannstedt is Jimmy's only friend. Haha. Don't get mad at me. I'm just telling you what Dave said. It's a joke, kind of. And so Jimmy was did not like the fact that he was losing Wannstedt, but that's it. Then Jimmy gets the Cowboy job again, if I've got the chronology about right. And Jimmy then calls Dave and says, "Okay, now I'm in the NFL. Now you need to come with me." Well, I got a contract with Don. So if I'm getting my story right, and I know I'm close, Don Shula and Jimmy have a conversation about, well, I want Wannstedt. Well, what are you going to do for me? And Daddy Don Shula suggested that, well, listen, I'll give you Wannstedt if you'll give my son, Dave Shula, a job on the coaching staff, which I think ended up being offensive coordinator, if I recall correctly. And Dave Shula, nice guy, probably got Peter principled there. And then, of course, the name Shula can be both a benefit and a burden. So that setup immediately, unfortunately, sets up David Shula to fail. He's not Jimmy's guy. He's not Aikman's guy. He maybe is underqualified at that time, and he just got the job basically because he's Daddy's son, and it was a trade. I'm sure in the back of Jimmy's mind, he's going, well, listen, I want to make this work with Dave. And I'm sure Jimmy knew Dave Shula. Certainly he did. I want to make this work with Dave, but if it doesn't work, I don't have to keep him here forever. That wasn't the agreement. But there's probably an underlying lack of respect for David Shula because of the way this thing came together. So we go to San Diego. And again, this is 1990. And the Cowboys are doing a thing with the Chargers, a dual training camp thing with the Chargers. And one night, some of the kids decided they're going to go out and have one more beer. And so I know it was Daryl Johnston, and I know he doesn't mind if I tell this story. I know it was Aikman. He probably doesn't love that I tell this story. I think it might have been Babe. I need to check in with him on that. And then I definitely know it was Jeff Zimmerman. Because of that group, Jeff Zimmerman was the veteran. Now, I don't know how he fell in with those fellows. And of course, he only lasted that one more year, 1990, Zimmerman did. But he had been here for 4 years, whatever. So maybe he knew his way around San Diego better than everybody else. At that early stage, maybe he was the only guy who had a driver's license. I don't know. So off they go. And they blow through curfew. Not by much, but by a little. And there was kind of a gated thing that you had to get into to get back into camp. And so they had to manipulate their way, driving back, Zimmerman driving, had to manipulate their way through the gate, sneak through. You're not going to sneak through. You're going to get caught. And they did get caught being late for curfew by David Shula. Now, at this point, if it's Jimmy that catches them late for curfew, they're probably peeing their pants. If it's Jerry who catches him late for curfew, it's probably because Jerry was coming in through the gate right behind him, having blown through curfew himself. But it's Dave Shula. And he's chastising these guys, these young players. And these young players are kind of going, okay, Dave, we get it. Do what you're going to do. Go tell Jimmy. Go find us. Make us do push-ups tomorrow. Do what you're going to do. We're a little late. We're a little drunk. And we're going to bed. But Shula won't stop. So the way I tell the story, and I say allegedly because I don't want my friend Daryl Johnson to sue me. Daryl Johnson couldn't take it anymore. And he had a couple suds in him. He takes a swing at Shula's face. And had he connected, of course, the whole world would know this story because this would be a $1 billion lawsuit because Daryl Johnson punching Dave Shula in the face would break his face. And Daryl Johnson misses Shula's face or Shula ducks and DJ's fist goes through the sheetrock wall at the training camp facility. So, yes, every once in a while, even the very professional from the very start, Troy Aikman, went and had himself a little bit of fun. By the time we got to Oxnard, this might have been the next year, unbeknownst to many, there was a strip club. I'm sorry, not Oxnard, Austin. There was a strip club within walking distance of the campus of St. Ed's. I mean, a half a block away. Now, you would think that there'd be zoning laws that would prevent that, but no. So plenty of the fellas would go, after they got off work, and go swing through there. I mean, you could walk there. Aikman, by this time, realizes my profile is a little too high for that now, for anything like that, whether he was predisposed to do anything like that or not. Aikman and Gogan, and sometimes by the time Hellestray got here, and then sometimes Fisher and Witt would go to a Holiday Inn that had been in a fire. And so the rooms were all burned out at the Holiday Inn. And they were working on them, and they were construction stuff. But the little bar inside the Holiday Inn was not burned out. Now, why the little bar stayed open, they didn't have anybody staying there. But the little bar stayed open. And probably Gogan found it. And that was Aikman's hangout in Austin to go get a beer away from everybody without curfew, without punching anybody in the face, without breaking any wall. The walls were already broken. The hotel was burned out. So, yeah, we got to sneak in there with Aikman and Gogan and Hellestray once in a while. Gogan, troublemaker. The upshoot of the David Shula part of this story is he was eventually out of coaching for 22 years, worked in his family dad's restaurant chain business. I'm sure he was a COO or something gigantic in the chain. I'm not saying he was a general, maitre d' at the restaurant. And returned to coaching after 22 years. He's now the wide receiver coach at Dartmouth. I don't know why, but good for him. In New Hampshire in the Ivy League. The Jimmy, Faith, Shula trust thing never quite got right. Dave Shula eventually ends up as like the wide receiver coach for the Cincinnati Bengals. Moves on. A rather innocuous position, relatively speaking, for an organization famously cheap, certainly then. And we get to about 1993, 94. And they fire their head coach, and Mike Brown, I guess, calls in David Shula, who's assuming he's getting fired too, and Mike Brown appoints him head coach. Why? Well, in addition to whatever qualifications David had, didn't cost him any money, relatively speaking, to have David Shula be the head coach. So that summer, David Shula, head coach of the Bengals. Jimmy's looking over their roster. He just happens to look over the roster and sees that they got cornerback problems. He's looking over his own roster. Again, this is 1990, whatever, early 90s. And he's going, I got 3 cornerbacks who can really play, and they're not going to make my team. He says, I think I'll do Dave a solid. Jimmy calls Dave Shula and says, I'll trade you one of my cornerbacks. Pick one. I'm going to do you a favor. I'll trade you one. And Dave, so still shaking from his Dallas experience, goes, well, sure, what do you want to trade? And Jimmy, I swear to you, says, case of Heineken. Send me a case of Heineken, and I will trade you this cornerback. Might start for you. You're not going to make this roster. Might start for you. Dave's like, what do you mean? And of course, what Jimmy meant is, I'll trade you a 17th round pick to be consummated in 2027. I'll send him there for nothing. We'll make up a trade. Just send me a case of Heineken. And Dave Shula was so shaken by his experience in Dallas and so non-trusting of everything that had to do with the Cowboys, Dave Shula turned down the trade because he thought somehow Dallas was going to screw him again. Somehow Dallas was going to try to punch him in the face again. There's your Uncle Fish story, background on Shula and Jimmy and Troy Aikman. Just that one time. Just one time. Busting curfew. Probably Daryl Johnson and Kevin Gogan's fault. Fish out.